Yeah, my background is political science, but I've been at the Center for Teaching and Learning for about 6.5 years now. Just started out as a faculty consultant, and really, though, focused especially on technology issues. And I'm just one of the associate directors there now, and special emphasis on everything Learning Suite. Implementation is, I think, what formally is my title, but I'm also kind of this product manager for the Learning Suite as well. And so I kind of wanted to tell you a little bit of the overall story of how we arrived at this point in time, and then maybe illustrate for you some of the struggles and challenges and things that we've had to go through to pull off this sort of an activity. And I just want to say, all of this is purely my opinion. Everything I say, I don't speak on behalf of the administration or anyone else. I'm just kind of telling some of the story as from my vantage point, working on the Learning Suite from day one, really. So what I want to do is, let me begin by asking a first question. Is it hard to build an LMS? What are your initial thoughts on something like that? When most people hear that BYU built their own LMS, they just look at us like, you guys are insane. I mean, why would anyone want to undertake that sort of an activity for themselves? Why not just go out there and buy a product or use an open source product and things like that? We at CTL didn't make the ultimate decision. We certainly tried to inform the decision made by the administration to go ahead and build a learning management system. But we, in the end, ended up with the task in our laps, or one way or another. Now, there's a couple things that I think led to the genesis of why we ended up doing this ourselves versus getting involved, just doing something that's more open source or just continuing to buy. Now, of course, we were Blackboard customers. There was a bit of a strained relationship there. I don't need to go into details of that, but there was a bit of a trust gap, I'd say, between Blackboard and some of the administration in particular. And it really, I think, started making the administration think about what is the future of this? Do we just continue to either continue with Blackboard or choose another vendor? What is the proper way to go about doing this? Now, about the time this decision was being made, there was a similar decision being made with regard to the football program, and they went independent. And I'm not sure the two decisions were totally independent of one another. Of course, I don't know that for sure. But independence had a ring, and it still has a ring in some ways, to be able to say, you know, if teaching courses is the essence of what we do in education, why shouldn't we have control of our own destiny with regard to the software that we use in order to do that? And actually, that was a bit of a story told by the CIO of our university, who was a strong proponent of just buying software and let somebody else deal with all of the hassles of it. I mean, it's just there's a lot of things that can go wrong. But that's kind of the insight that he had. He kind of decided, let's give this thing a try. This is an important enough task that maybe we should control our own destiny in this area. I think something else that kind of helped them move along was this sense of, but don't we already have parts of an LMS in essence? The Center for Teaching and Learning has been building some tools over time. So was Builder Digital Dialogue, were a couple of those. Those are really just started out as tools to kind of help faculty do better feedback and better syllabi. But in a lot of ways, these could be important tools within any learning management system. We had a great book that we helped develop in conjunction with Agilix, who put it into their Brain Honey product. So we're just missing a few pieces. We kind of need a testing system and a content system, and maybe we can just start putting these things together and end up building our own. So we weren't really starting completely from scratch, or at least it didn't look that way. In a lot of ways, we really were starting from scratch, in that even the pieces that we did have, in order to really make them do what we wanted them to do, we essentially had to re-engineer them. So in some sense, we really did start from the beginning. Go ahead, Charles.
Jeff, from your perspective, what was the main, I'm not going to say evils, but the main challenges that you're trying to avoid by being independent?
I didn't, having not made the decision, I can't be 100% sure of that. I mean, there's pros and cons to both of these positions. I can only, it's purely my opinion on something like this. And the hunch is, the university doesn't like to be held over a barrel to someone else. You know, when we put in requests to LMS vendors. That's nice. They'll get put into a queue of a million other requests, and we tend not to get a lot of reaction, even though we're a pretty big user of these systems. I think that really began to grate on people over a period of time. We just cannot get what we want in a product. And one of the benefits, though, is that hopefully they're more stable and better, good data centers and things like that. But we had some major outages and things too. So we had a week-long outage, and I think that all of these things just eventually came together as in this straw that broke the camel's back.
So do you know if open source options were also viewed as being outside of our control?
Open source, we had done a little bit of exploration of a couple other tools. Moodle at first, but when we were looking at them, we were thinking, all right, to make the tools we already have and those fit together are also major engineering tasks. And once we start changing those tools over here, we can't keep the benefits of the open source community, because as that course changes, it changes us again. And so from a demand standpoint, it actually didn't seem to be that feasible. Even though it's very attractive in so many ways, there's so many benefits that can come from an open source community. But I think that that's what, in the end, whether right or wrong, that was the decision, is that we're going to have to re-engineer that stuff anyway. So why don't we just control our own engineering? And I think that's why we ended up where we ended up. All right, there's a lot going on here. This kind of tells the story of Learning Suite. And I just want to point out a few things. This was the magnitude of the task. You have to remember, we were replacing Blackboard. Blackboard, I don't remember any exact numbers, but I think at one point in time when I was out at a conference there, I was talking about having well in surplus of 10 million lines of code. These are incredibly complex tools, even if we don't always like and love them. But I knew how difficult it was going to be to pull this sort of thing together. Okay, that's great if you got 5 years though, right? So that's a totally different story. But what we had was this. We met together in the Center for Teaching and Learning in September of 2010. And at that point, Russ Saskathorpe announced to us that this is our new charge. That the university has made the decision to do this, and we need to start right away on the task of actually creating a replacement system. The thing that we had been told was to shoot for a couple of key dates. Hopefully, we'd like to get something out there and operational by really December of 2011. But knowing that's going to be pretty aggressive, that's 15 months or something like that, they kind of had in their minds built in, well, the real date that we all have to be really concerned about is our contract does expire with Blackboard in April of 2012. So our timeline was looking like at first 15 months, but even if you give us some grace period, we're looking at 19 months to conceptualize and build an entire learning management system for the university. Now, if you start understanding that these are not easy things, this was a challenge. And go ahead, Andy.
It seems like there was an additional challenge because you were not just building this as a piece of self-contained software on campus, but you had to work with all of the software interfaces on campus, getting and exchanging data back and forth.
Absolutely.
It was an immense undertaking.
The vision of this too is, well, if we're going to do something like this, let's make it really work for BYU. And Jeff Keith likes to tell the story about when he met with, he was at a conference and one of the vice presidents of Google was saying, well, why don't you do an LMS? Someone asked the vice president. He said, well, because it would require such deep integration and intense programming for each campus to really make it do what we want it to do and really talk to all the university systems. Well, that's the one thing that we actually can control and really do. And so in doing Learning Suite, that was what we thought was really the biggest bang for our buck that we could get. We might lose some of the benefits of the open source community, but we can get deep integrations that we can't get necessarily by leveraging that software. So 19 months, replaced 12 million lines of code somewhere, or at least a system that did a lot of that. Integrated with all of the things here on campus. We weren't really sure what our resources were at this point in time. We knew they were going to be short, and all of us had concerns. I'll be honest, we all sat in a meeting room once remember it like it was yesterday. This was probably September, maybe October, and we all sat there and we're kind of dividing up roles and figuring out what each of us was going to do to make this thing happen. And Larry Seawright was guiding the meeting at that moment, and he said, how many people here, he sensed some concern in the room. How about that? How many people here think that we can pull this off? No, actually, ask it in the negative. How many people here think we cannot do this by the prescribed time period? Every person in the room raised their hand. Programmers, designers, everybody, I don't think we can pull this off. It's just too aggressive. So we had to get creative. Our deadlines were not going to change too much, and so we just had to do what we could possibly do. So we started out September. I began gathering and writing requirements documentation. Designers, with what they already had, were already starting to figure out, what do we build? We also thought, what was the longest build that we were going to have? Exams. That's, in a lot of ways, the most complicated of the tools. So we focused on outlining that one first, designing it, and by around January, it's still 4 or 5 months later, we were kind of intensively starting to build that, even though the design documents were really changing quite a bit as we were going. So what was happening is that designers and programmers and everybody were kind of working in parallel. It wasn't this nice serial process that we would love it to be if we had a little bit more time to go. During all of this year, we were hoping to release in December of this year. We had certain parts of it together, but frankly not in a way that was really going to work for people yet. But we did start in January with beta testing with about 30 faculty members, 35 faculty members. Went through as many, worked through as many hiccups and things as we possibly could. And by April, we had to go into spring courses. And because Blackboard's going to turn off in May, that was the middle of the semester, we really had to have everybody migrated into the new system, or if they want, they could use another system if they wanted to. But those who wanted to use the campus system, we had to have them up and running in April. So we had a month overlap between the two systems. So we had to get creative on the implementation side as well, because usually universities have at least a year overlap and they just have faculty members do their own thing. All right, those are a few of the challenges and milestones that we had to deal with, and so we scrambled. We worked, I'll be honest, none of us took a vacation or anything until probably, it's been 28, 29, how many months are we at now? But it's been 2 years and 1 semester, and we're just now beginning to take vacations again. So it's very unhealthy. It was mentally unhealthy, quite frankly, for a lot of us involved. It was a tough time in a lot of ways. Now this, I just wanted to kind of show you a little bit who was involved, and these are all IP&T people in most cases, who are actually doing all of this work. Now I just want you to know, upper left-hand corner represents the most important people. I'm just kidding. This is no particular order. This isn't a hierarchy. But my job there, I'm the one that's not from IP&T, but requirements gathering, product management, and implementation are the things that I was charged with. Design, we had great designers already in place. Their problem was dealing with, a bowling ball through the garden hose, which is they had to design everything all at once so that programmers could start figuring out how in the world they're going to piece things together and actually build this. So Tanya is really the lead designer, that's the way I think of it anyway. And Nate Walton is also our graphical designer. He has a very important hand. Mike Johnson, Carrie Johnson, all of these guys have been really instrumental in different pieces of this. And I put Lindell up here too, because she's been in charge of the entire help system and things like that, and help documents, getting started documentation, things like that, some implementations. We have been a little light, in my estimation anyway, to get this done with these programming resources. So we essentially had 3 programmers that we could use. And these are full-time people at the Center for Teaching and Learning. They hire student teams of anywhere, they flex 20, 25 students, which is great. Some of them are absolutely some of the best, most phenomenal programmers you can imagine, but they're also unknown. Their schedules are unknown. And when a project comes along that they have to take care of for class, Learning Suite development begins to grind more slowly. And so it's an uncertain labor force actually that we're dealing with, and this was a major challenge and getting things done. We did hire a few other full-time people as contractors, but even them, you know, we don't correctly control in some ways. And we didn't totally control their schedules. If they have trouble with their family or something, they may be gone for the next 2 months. And there's not really much of anything we can do with it. So putting things together just in personnel has been really difficult. And then, of course, Larry, maybe we should put him at the top, really, but evaluation and project management has been his thing. But everyone at CTL has had something to do with Learning Suite at some point in time. So we really ought to fill it up. But these are kind of the resources that we had to deal with. We did have help, too, from OIT. They were working on various things as well. Here's what OIT's been supplying for us. When we built this, we built the whole thing on web services. The whole university was moving to web services so we could get instantaneous data from multiple databases around campus. This is a nice deep integration. But it was also just changing and developing. There's been a lot of changes through time we've had to recode to as we've run into problems. They also host the servers down in the data center. So if the data center hiccups, Learning Suite hiccups. And that's most of the hiccups we've had in the last 4 months or so have been problems that have actually been, you know, data center related, maybe an interruption in internet service and things like that. But they take care of keeping the machines up, backup, user support 4000 is a good asset there. We're throwing them a couple other projects like rewriting Scout, and Scout is the system that grades exams for both the testing center and for Learning Suite. That has to be further adopted and expanded to really make it do what we need to do. And we gave them a mobile app, but we haven't given them all the data that they need yet to make that mobile app really operational. So we're still working on it. So there's a lot of people across the university working on it. Very few of these people, though, are new hire type people. They're all existing resources. And a lot of people talk about a lot of the money that's been invested into Learning Suite. Well, it's really not a lot of new money that's been invested in Learning Suite. It's really just that we retasked people that were doing other things to build and maintain Learning Suite. All right, so we had tight deadlines. So what do? What were our requirements? We had been looking all along at how people have been using Blackboard. We had this data pretty firm, so we focused in on those major issues as far as the scope of the project that we were trying to accomplish. You can see right here, just posting docs, email, gradebook, course announcements, simple, standard functions that any learning management system is going to have. And we focused in on these. If it wasn't core to this, we weren't doing it, is what it came down to. Go ahead.
How did you come up with this list?
These are technology surveys that we actually take every year with faculty members. So we've got a nice track record of how they used at least Blackboard. That's not a perfect indicator of how they use Learning Suite, because we actually have more people that use digital dialogue and exams and stuff like that in Learning Suite than we did in Blackboard. So this is where the core that we actually focused on. So we began designing what we thought would be really good for users. Don't laugh. Here's an example of an early design of the content system that we were hoping to create. Over here, automatically created weeks and nice timelines. Students do like to they do like to see things in timelines and or topics. That's how they like to see their courses organized. So we were just going to do all of that for you. But in the authoring window, we're going to let you pull things out of all other areas of the system. Drop an assignment on that page, so they don't have to go somewhere else to be able to get it. Hyperlink, I've used it before, just drag it in, and things like that. We thought this was going to be fantastic. Well, what do you think the programmers thought of it? They weren't impressed. They're like, yeah, right. So our vision was multiple objects in the authoring page, so that any of them could be expanded and contracted at any time. So if I have a link in there, I could just pop it open in the window right there in the context of the page. If I had a digital dialogue, I could pop that one open too, and I could still have all of my other objects open, and the user could really control that. Well, it's a little complex. Not everyone's going to get it. Of course, I haven't even explained it. This is what we got. This is what we could produce in that time period. We'll give you an editing window. You can drop a few things into it. And that's about it. And we were having serious discussions in November of 2011, just a little over a year ago, of whether or not we were even going to get this in. I mean, from a resource standpoint, there are just too many things going on. Here's a preliminary drawing too of kind of a course dashboard, which brought up announcements, notifications of what's going on inside of your exams, university calendars and class calendars, all brought together, information at your fingertips. Now here's what's in Learning Suite today. Way more simple, maybe in some ways simple's nicer, but also not as deep, not as fleshed out as we were originally trying to do. So the whole idea, so while we started with some pretty aggressive design desires, we really just had to scale things back in order to get a working product. If product doesn't work, then it doesn't matter what the features are if they don't work. So in order to also, oh, go ahead. Got a question?
Yeah, regarding the last thing you just mentioned, I think it's common for designers to shoot for the stars and then have the reality set in and knock back. So how did you prioritize your features?
It was a constant negotiation with the programmers. We always have feature lists, but many of our really prioritized lists are of features that don't currently exist yet. A lot of times we had this design and we just sit down with them and say, okay, how long does it take to build this? How long does it take to build that? What are the complications here? And we'd say, all right, well, we can give up this function, but we really cannot let go of this function. It was literally almost an ad hoc discussion sitting down with programmers and just doing trade-offs.
Is that a weekly meeting that you had a shared list?
It was, yeah, daily, almost weekly to daily. Yeah, go ahead.
So when John Mott was here, I know, most of this happened after he left.
After John was gone.
But one of the visions that John was pushing was this idea of having a system that could take in pieces that third-party developers or we built ourselves. So if you could take an exam tool that maybe somebody creates an exam tool that we think is really pretty good, that we could integrate that into our core system, and our core system is what communicates with all of our internal systems. And I know that other LMSs are kind of moving that direction, moving away from the Blackboard model of the omnibus, we do everything towards, we do these core things, but then if you want to use Google Documents within the system, you can plug it in and it communicates with our system and work with the system. And I'm just wondering what...
Agile changed to become a platform provider rather than an LMS provider, partly to satisfy that exact vision. A lot of trade-offs involved, even in that. I mean, isn't there in everything, And while that was the initial vision, I think that it's morphed a little bit. In theory, that's all still possible. And it's mainly possible because of the web service model. As long as all the web services are published, then someone in education should be able to go in, create their own interface, and be able to leverage that data. But there's that platform underneath that still has to make it all work together. So that is going to be possible. So how do you plug in a Google Docs if we at the platform level haven't done that yet? That's an entirely different thing. Yeah, so we haven't totally lost that vision, but I think in a lot of ways it has taken a little bit of a back seat because he was interested especially in pulling in Google Docs for this component and this is something else for that component. Literally almost all a web of third-party tools. And we have not ended up in that place, partly from a usability issue perspective, which is that it's hard when you're dealing with a lot of different systems and logins and things like that. And there's a lot of people who struggle with usability, quite frankly. And so I think we've ended up with a blend of that. While it's possible, it's not obvious to the user that this is just a series of systems that actually could be, that are components that could be taken in or out.
So the trade-off is perhaps simplicity for the power that would come from being able to use.
In some ways. But we'll continue developing the power of the platform though, so that, and I think that we'll be able to do a little bit more of that in the future, once we can kind of work through this list of missing essential pieces. So I think we'll be getting there. Now the other thing the programmers did was they just leveraged a lot of things that were already out there. We had a scoring system. Okay, we need a scoring system for our tests. Well, we have a scoring system for the testing center. Now in truth, what the testing center does is not really what we fully want to do in the online component. So it got us to operational faster, but we need to significantly rebuild and extend Scout because it was built for the testing center in its own particular purposes. So why we were able to pull some of these things together fast is because of some of the pre-existing pieces. Like some of those that we had built, Agilix, all the CTL projects, mail systems. We just used the Exchange mail account and we sent stuff out for people. But that creates a problem. This is where speed cost us, and we knew it would cost us. And that is that Exchange will not let us send email on your behalf because that's what a spammer would do. So it won't allow us to do that. So when you send an email to a student, they cannot hit the reply to button and send it back to you. So we're doing changes. We got the system fast, but it's not always exactly what we want. So we're now just kind of improving and extending on each of these things. All right, you saw that we had a 1 month overlap, and we had to try and get everybody into the system really quickly. So Fred Webb sponsored an implementation team that Carrie Johnson and I put together. We originally hired 65 students to go into faculty offices and just help do it. Sit down with them, answer phones, things like that, and make it happen. About 40% of faculty members ended up using the implementation systems in some significant way. Most did it themselves, and I'd say there's probably 20 to 30% out there that should have used the implementation systems because they're still not doing it right in a sense. A little bit of teaching would really help them on their way, but it's hard. It's a voluntary process. So now buy-in's a totally different issue. First of all, nobody wants to make a big change, or very few people want to make a big change. In systems like this, it is an extremely painful thing to switch from one LMS to another. The change involved is tough, let alone moving to a product that we know is on a very tight deadline and is missing some of its critical pieces and hasn't been as fully tested for stability and speed and things like that as before. So we're still working on the buy-in issue. We've got a long ways to go on that. Actually, when you look at faculty comments on this thing, they range from, I love Learning Suite, it's the best thing I've ever seen, it improves my teaching, to, I can't stand this hunk of junk, why are you forcing it down our throats, can we please get rid of it already? And that's the continuum of faculty response at this point in time. A lot of it had to do with not just features, a lot of people got hemmed in on features, so we didn't have quite as much there. But performance and speed were the biggest challenges when everybody really got forced in the fall. We were just running way too slow. And we were overwhelming university data systems with calls. Actually, let me show you a little graph here. These are calls to something called the person service. And that is, the Learning Suite needs to know who you are, what your rights are, goes out and gets information about you. At the beginning of fall semester, these are the number of calls into the system per minute. So we've got 4,000 or 5,000 calls per minute being made. Most of which is by Learning Suite. That was yellow. So as people were trying to use it, we were overwhelming these other university data systems by trying to gather information from them. This caused a crash. You exceed that puppy, requests get lost, data gets lost, and it's running so slow at that point, no one can get their stuff. So obviously the first thing that we really focused on all last semester was speed and stability. We can't let this thing go down. We can't go this slow. This is actually a comparison graph right here in the front with Learning Suite being the red. This is actually the end of the semester when we actually have the highest traffic. This is the amount of load that we're putting on some of those key services on campus. So what happened was we simply programmed it much more efficiently, and they spent a lot of the fall trying to figure out how to speed things up and not overwhelm systems and get this thing working in a more stable way. So we had a lot of success towards the end of the semester, but the beginning was frankly rocky. Yes?
What you're talking about describes kind of an interesting thing. You originally architected the system, and you brought pieces together, but what you're saying is you had to go back and kind of refactor the functions, size down some of the programs, recombine programs. So the architecture, what parts of the architecture remained the same, and how extensive were the changes?
We started taking out calls just because some pages would take forever to load and it was just hanging up the system. These here, what they really were doing is they were using, I don't know all the details of this, maybe some of you know this better, but they're using REST services, and in theory, every time you need a piece of data, you do a separate data call for it. But in reality, we're overwhelming, the Oracle database that holds all of this stuff, and so what they had to do is they just went back and they reprogrammed it all away from the theory to something that they thought would actually work. We're going to batch call, process, and then give you what you need. So that reduces the loads on all of the systems. So it's not a pure programming thing, but it works better for our situation. So it's really with how the web services are
Did
constructed.
this lead to some new insights or understandings, discoveries?
Well, that theory is good, but in practice you're going to have to alter it. It's just depending on the context that you're in. So you really do have to be able to adapt as we go. But this is good because the first few days of this semester we really haven't run into any situations where we've had significant overloads of servers or anything like that. So we know that the efficiency is really working better at this point. So we've done almost 4 months of work on just stability and performance, or speed actually. So it's been a challenging thing. You remember the crash. It's called the event on campus. I call it the Great Meltdown of 2012, which is what it really was. It was really a catastrophic thing, and it really hurts. And because we lost a month of development time right before fall semester to really be able to be testing and working and stuff in the system, and it just put everyone behind because of that data center crash.
I was just going to say, when you call it the event, though, we also get it confused with the OIT meltdown, which I think was May, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's actually the one. That's the one I'm. Yeah,
That's the apocalypse.
It was the Memorial Day.
The Memorial Apocalypse.
The Memorial Apocalypse, and that's exactly what it was. They call it the event. We call it whatever you want. It was catastrophic,
So you're talking
and
about
we've
the
been
same-
recovering ever since.
I thought you were talking about October here,
So no, when I talked about the crash there, I really was talking about
the
that.
May one.
Just because we were right in the middle of a
Alright.
semester, we were right in the middle of final development for fall, when more and more people were going to come into the system, and we're just dead in the water. We can't even get a server to stay up for more than a couple hours before it corrupts and goes back down again. So they were working at their desks for what they could do, but it kind of put us in a real bind going into fall semester. Maybe we could have had more things worked out then at that point if we'd had a little bit more time. But when we do these surveys, students have been very receptive to this overall, and we find that the people who are most negative, the students who are most negative, are the ones who have professors who are most negative. In other words, the professor spends the first 5 to 10 minutes of class complaining about Learning Suite, then that's going to have some impact on the students as well. But other than that, most people that kind of hold their frustration in, and not spread it to everybody else, it really does have an impact. But we need time. We need time to bake. We've gotten most all of the big bugs out during the end of last semester. Speed and stability are much improved, but it just needs to stay that way for a while before we'll really be able to get people's trust and be able to, I think, get full buy-in from faculty members. But we are having some successes. Let me see if I have. I was thinking, maybe I didn't put this in here. I had a quote somewhere. Sorry, I don't have it. I'll actually just paraphrase it for you. It's from Case Dice, who is running an 1,100 person course, and he runs 2 exams a day. And most of the problems we were actually having were in the exams area. It was the most untested, most complex area. he was very frustrated at the beginning of the semester. He let email fly to everyone around the university, and that's fine. We understand. We want to know where people's pain is and do everything we can to respond to it. And around November, he wrote back in and said, okay, it's time to start. I've done my bit of trashing, and it's time to start giving credit where it's due. And he says, we're now to the point where I'm still giving all the same exams, but I'm actually spending much less time now in it doing these tasks than I was in Blackboard. And so and we're starting to, I actually am starting to get these almost daily, every other day. Some very vocal faculty member says, you know what, I complained a lot, but I just want to say thanks for that things have gotten better in the last. Doesn't mean everything's perfect. There's a lot of room for improvement, but things are moving along, I guess, a little bit. So our product management triangle here is a nightmare. The scope is, I think, the biggest thing that suffered. We just had to give up a lot of our scope, and we have yet to release many of the great and glorious features that we would like to see in Learning Suite. And it's going to take time to get those things in, because again, we don't have endless resources. We're still essentially running on our student programming crew with the full-timers who kind of guide, direct, and lead that work and really make it happen. Let's see, friction. There's always the standard friction with programming, right? You asked about how did we pare things down. Well, there's a lot of heated conversations where we have that. You know, why can't you do this? And honestly, it's some distrust. Are you just saying that because you don't want to do it? Or are you telling me that's going to take a month? It doesn't seem like it's going to take a month to me. You know, and so there's just a tremendous amount of friction, I'm guessing. Maybe the designers would like to say something about how we manage that, or if we had any. What do you think? What are your experiences?
Yeah, I think there's definitely friction. I think but I think no matter where you work, there's always that give and take of this is what I really like and this is what we can do. I think the hardest thing, like being honest and open, the hardest thing was working with the programs where sometimes they'd be working on a Saturday when you're not working on a Saturday, and they would not have time for something, so they would change something or rip something out, and you would have no idea how they changed, you know. So there's sometimes, if we didn't meet often or our communication wasn't there, a lot of times we still open Learning Suite and are like, oh, that's how that works? Oh, I didn't know that.
Early in the process, we had all had ad hoc meetings, and frankly, I don't think nearly enough of them. We now have daily meetings with programmers and work through issues. Yeah. They talk about bugs that may have come up over the night. Do we need to respond in some way? This thing just seems like it's higher priority. We need to shoot up the priority list, things like that. Go ahead.
Sometimes students in our program will come to a faculty member and say, well, do I really have to take any of those technology courses? Do I need the computer-based instruction course, 560, 760? The answer is, so our designers here probably learned a lot about programming from having to deal with the programmers.
Oh, yeah.
Would it have helped you if you had known going in a little bit more? Would you say that the average student coming out of here ought to know how to manage the programmer relationship?
Yeah, I wish I knew even more about programming. Like you're saying, when you're having those conversations, I mean, as you start working, you start to learn a little bit more working with the programmers, but I definitely wished I knew a little bit more about
So I would just say to all of you, don't ask me that question, okay? It's a dumb question, don't ask it. You're going out there into a world where computers are becoming more and more a part of what we do, rather than less and less. And you will get a degree. If you don't understand that part of technology, you'll get a degree and you'll have no place to use it, basically. So, thanks.
Programmers will respect you more too if you can speak their language. Nate Walton does a lot of our CSS type work and stuff in Learning Suites, and he's also a graphic artist. And but because of that, I think that he has the most trust in a lot of ways among the programmers because he does programming. So there's a lot of reasons to know it for your own sake as well as to blend in with the team. This was a challenge too to the historical way things have been done at BYU. In the past, all technology products or major projects like this have been done through OIT, either financed by them or built by them. And suddenly, CTL, little CTL, is just making little syllabus builders and things like that, is charged with this sort of a massive task outside of OIT orbit. Now, honestly, we could never have done it without a lot of work on behalf of OIT. But it's also odd to have an IT organization and a lot of IT development for enterprise applications going on a little bit outside of the orbit of that organization. So it can create some territoriality and some friction at times. But I think one of the things, a lot of things that we, often when you hear administrators talk, they're like, you know what, I'm just totally stunned at how well you guys have worked out this relationship and have worked it with OIT, because it would be easy to become very territorial about things. But I think we've developed a good working relationship. Just like Peter was going to say something first.
I was just curious because Russ, simultaneously, from what I've heard as well, the church itself, with its new curriculum, actually reorganized the departments up there. And I was wondering if any of sort of what he was experiencing there, or perhaps here, bled over into how do you reorganize and get people who normally are siloed working together?
Yeah, there's not any big reorganization efforts going on here, but the exact same tensions go on. That's the thing that Russ will tell you about, is these tensions between designers and programmers, and sometimes power struggles between departments. There was a big problem with that, even up at the church as well. And the same kinds of struggles exist everywhere you're trying to pull off a project like this. But they reorganized a little more, and we really haven't gone through a reorganization process here. So CTL will continue. The main coding and development, design angle, and all of the back-end main things are just OIT is happy to continue providing all of those things for us. It may not make the most sense, but there's not any movement afoot, at least I know of, to do it to reorganize.
See, the same thing happens in our communities when we speak different languages and we have different priorities, and so I think that's part of what Andy's saying about, you know, if you learn the language of the programmer, or you learn the language of the, you know, the artist, then when you are in a design team with those people, you know how to communicate with them, and you value what they have to offer, and they can value what you have to offer, and it makes the community more cohesive.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just taking a lot of people skill, I think, too, to go across that silo. But there was goodwill on both parts to try and make that happen, and it's worked fairly well.
Do you think this will lead to a new culture on the campus where OIT is willing to get more? I mean, we're an educational institution, not an IT institution.
Yeah.
Do you think this will result in kind of a blending of cultures, and so that moving forward, you don't have to keep fighting political, territorial battles?
I'm not sure what to say about what the future is. I'm not sure I have a strong feeling one way or the other. I think OIT is open to making those sorts of movements. I think they'd like to see more of that interaction happen with other departments on campus, a little like it has with CTL. It does do some of those things with SAS and some of the other academic departments, or not academic, but administrative departments, where really a lot of the design and front-end work is being done in another unit. They're just there to support and make the infrastructure work for them. I think that we can see more of that kind of activity possibly as a result of this. It had to happen to make this work at all.
This may be cynical, but in my experience with OIT, they're very accommodating and helpful if you have money to pay them.
Yeah, well, their business model is very different. It is. That's what I mean. There is two cultures, and they work on a bill for hours, work, and we're just we have the staff and they're financed, and we just get every bit of work out of them that we possibly can. So sometimes it creates a little bit of a problem, and we need to make sure though that they've got cash in their pot to work on Learning Suite projects as well, because their resources are different than ours.
So is Learning Suite so integrated with our systems, BYU Provo systems, that it's really not practical for it to be used in other places, like for example,
Yeah.
in other BYU educational systems or other church systems that use LMS.
See, yes, I think that there is a good probability that eventually other campuses could adopt this. And all it really requires is us to make the same kinds of connections into their data structures the way that we've done ours. So it should be entirely possible to export this. It's not that you put it in a box, but we just simply need to get their web services and hook up to them as well. So I think that will happen, maybe in somewhere in a 4 to 5 year time period. That sort of thing I think will begin to develop. And probably Independent Study will be the first organization we partner with to do those sorts of things, so that if you have a learning, you can just go to Learning Suite and also do your Independent Study course as well as your campus courses. There's some downsides though to the integration, and I went ahead and put one of them up here. At least as of it exists right now, all of our data runs off of university systems. So you want to do a MOOC, Learning Suite's not your way to do it, because you cannot create a course very easily that has a separate enrollment structure. Now there is a community, but it's not the way that people want to run a larger open type of course. What we really need is to take the next step to actually separate from that. We'll always retain our university data structures, but also to have, in addition, the ability to have more open courses that don't rely on that data for our enrollment.
Does that mean that you are interested in integrating more LTI types of things?
Absolutely, yeah. We've got it on the list right now that we need to support LTI going forward, because if we're going to work with other publishers, and most everybody's using LTI as far as I can, moving in that area. So we've been passing that stuff to programmers. We're not compliant with that yet, but it's absolutely on our roadmap to become compliant with LTI. Learning
Tools
interface. So it's basically a way to port information between systems, and so that the ability to pop in other people's systems and get the resources that you need. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to keep bringing things up, but
Yeah.
this is why I invited you to come.
Okay.
It's terribly selfish motives here.
All right.
Because I'm hoping that these guys are seeing that you have your little designer constructs that you think you and the programmers have their little designer constructs. And one of the things that kind of happened while you guys were doing this was the languages started to blend. And if you stop and consider it, if a school is based on, I'm sorry, not really. If a school bases its information technology structure on computer structures, it's going to look like a computer. You're going to deal with it as a computer. If BYU has a way forward here to actually make a revolution in the way that this works, somehow these educational structures will move to the fore in our thinking and blend with the information technology structures, and there will be a new architecture that's framed in the language of information technology and learning technology. I think that this, over future history, this is a major thing that ought to happen. Because right now, things like Blackboard have education looking like grade books. But education is not a grade book. What would the computer interface look like for a student if it were an educational interface blended with an IT interface? What would it offer? What would it afford? What would its services be? What would it look like? How would you interact with it? I just think we have a chance now. We own the software. We have a chance for a revolution in educational software.
I think right now what we've got is a partial evolution. I'm just saying as of today, which is that we had major functions we had to replace. They still look mostly like things that were in Blackboard, and in a lot of ways we're still built heavily around AIM and us serving whatever data we can get. But there's a reverse impact too.
Digital dialogue tool is a big step forward from what was available in Blackboard.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's that's a learning-oriented piece of the tool, even though it's way down on the list
Of usage.
Of usage. It's not as much a periphery grading. I mean, those are important things in education, but they're kind of the outward manifestation.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a feedback tool, but I think that as we develop more of those things, and as we have more time to break out in different ways, like you're talking about, we will begin to start redesigning the IT infrastructure to serve us. I think we've asked for minimal changes at this point so that we can get something up and running. But you're right, I think that it's pretty open horizon at this point. If we want to do something differently, then IT has to do something differently to support a new digital dialogue model, for example. And there hasn't been a lot of infrastructure change just to accommodate that. So a lot of it does start with the designers and envisioning what this new future is going to be, and seeing if we can then get IT to go along with this.
So we should be so proud of our designers and of the guys that marshaled this project through. Really unprecedented. And I've seen a lot of LMSs being designed and developed in industry. This is unprecedented, really, it is. So
Thank you for sharing that. Well, I'm sure we're low on time, so you tell me what we do next. Any other thoughts or questions?
I just maybe have one question. So you talked about how in order to get this done in such an incredible time frame, you really have to marshal all these responsibilities of people that were previously doing lots of other things.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, what's the future of CTL? Are we going to continue to, was this a temporary shift in thinking or a permanent shift in thinking? Because like Andy's saying, I tend to think education is, LMS supports education, but education is more than LMS, and I would love to see CTL doing a lot more than just the LMS thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to happen in the future?
We have had to cut back on other things that we did in the past. And I think that the responsibility for Learning Suite and where it goes in the future will remain in CTL. And I think that that overall is a good thing. And I think even people over in OIT would say, that's probably something that you should keep hold of. Because you're the consultants, you're the people out with faculty every day, going to conferences and stuff on that. Which is good, but it does eat up a lot of our time that we've been doing other things. I don't see that shifting at this point. There could be an organizational change. But I also don't see a lot of new resources coming into this. So I think that kind of the balance we're at right now with CTL is that this is still going to be full steam ahead for the next year or two with a lot of our staff just to get it to the point where we would really feel like we've got the system that we want. And other things are going to take a backseat probably for the next year or two as we do that. That's my deal for it.
Jeff, can we say thank you so much for